Good evening, everybody. This is the draft recap version of Backyard Buckets, brought to you by Backyard Sports. I got Bentley and Ryan with me as always. Bentley, how you doing, bud?
Doing well, man. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, sir. Ryan, how about you?
I would not want to be anywhere else. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, this is the place to be. The place to be. All right. Well, we've got a neat format we're going to do for you tonight. We're going to stick to kind of splash or trash. We introduced that a little bit last week. Segment that we're talking about kind of up, down in terms of draft winners and losers. So, got some teams that everybody thinks are winners and got some teams that people think are losers. And we're going to see whether we can come to some sort of agreement or if we're going to have to lose some chicklets or something before the end of the night. So let's jump right in. Splash or trash. All right, let's jump right in and let's talk about the Utah Jazz. So, Ryan, I'm going to go your way first. Splash or trash? The Jazz are draft winners.
So this one I think is complex because I'm kind of I love their draft. That's what I'll say. I think they had a great draft. So I'm gonna splash it in a vacuum. I like the Hendricks pick. I'm excited for the 5-man 6'9" offense. Being bigger than the Magic is hard to do, and I think they've achieved it. I like the Keontae George pick in a vacuum again. This is where my concern about it being not so great, right? From a philosophical perspective, I think there were better fits than George there. What I like about George is he creates his own shot, and the Jazz have very little of that, especially from the guard position. They basically have none of it with Clarkson likely gone. And then, of course, they get that again with Bryce Sensabaugh, who I think was a good pick down at the end of the first. I just think that they could have jumped on the Cam Whitmore slide, picked a higher upside guy with a pick George, and I think they probably could have traded up their late first-round pick and probably still got George like a couple picks later because I think they reached a little bit for George, who I like, and I think they could have got a guy. When you're a team that's in a spot that's has the potential to grow somebody, Whitmore's a perfect spot, right in the middle of the first round. I don't think anyone would say that was a reach if they took him there and then jumped up to get George. A lot of teams in the late or early 20s and late teens were like, we'll trade out. I think they had the opportunity to do that. But again, in a vacuum, I think it's a splash. I like all three picks. And I think they were decent value. Really like the Sensabaugh pick a lot. A guy who had injury issues and kind of had a rough medical. He didn't have like a great medical, and has had meniscus issues. But another guy who can get his own shot, and I think they really need that. As goofy of a player as he is.
For sure, and yeah, I think sometimes too, you go into a draft, you fall in love with a guy, and sometimes you just take him, and you don't necessarily worry about value at the spot you pick him, and that might be what they ran into with Keontae George. I agree with you. I like him, but I do agree that I had him a little later in the first round. Bentley, how do you feel about the Jazz? Winners?
I do like what they did. Sorry, I would not have taken George where they did. Jalen Hood-Schifino was still on the board. That's probably where I would have gone. He's a little more of a distributor, in my opinion, than Keontae George is, and like Ryan mentioned, they're going to have a bunch of big guys out there that can score. With the addition of Sensabaugh as well at the end of the first, they're going to have offense, right? That's not going to be an issue for them. Keontae George, less of like a driving the bus as Charles Barkley likes to say. Less of a floor general, but overall they added a lot of good talent to their roster. So I think it was a successful draft night for them.
Yeah, I agree with both of you in terms of from a roster composition standpoint. I like the picks they made, right? I like what Sensabaugh, I like what George can do, and Hendricks, I had him higher right in our mock draft, so I think it's clear how I feel about Hendricks and his upside. But from a roster composition perspective, I have to see what they're going to do in free agency. Are they going to be able to get that quarterback? Because I don't think that Keontae George is that quarterback. I see him a little more in the mold of like what Devin Booker has become for the Suns in terms of a guy who can get the ball up the floor for you and take pressure off your point guard, but he's not going to be the guy that's going to be, as you put it, Bentley, that floor general, right? He's going to be a lot more of kind of, and I'm not here trying to tell you that he's going to be Devin Booker, right? Scoring 30, 40 points in a playoff game, but that's more of the mold of what I see for Keontae George. Who are they going to go get? Ryan, you mentioned Clarkson might be gone there. Who are they going to go get to be that guy? I don't know that they have it on their roster right now. We joked about it last week that they were going to, just play 5 guys up front, right? Basically 5 front court guys potentially. So, and somebody even put out the proposed lineup with Kelly Olynyk in the starting lineup. So that
Yes.
Yeah, Point Laurie.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. All right, well, let's shift gears over here. Let's talk about one that was proposed as kind of a loser. Bentley, I'm going to start with you on this one. So draft the Heat or draft losers?
So I think if we were to go back in the archives and go back to our mock draft, I had this pick nailed. I pinned it to the board and said, this is the pick. And so it turned out to be correct, right? So I do not think that they are losers. We are speaking on this pod in light of free agency starting tomorrow, so we don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yep.
So just speaking on the draft, I think that they won their draft pick. Jaime Jaquez is.
You won their draft pick.
I won their draft pick. That's right. Thank you for recognizing. I was hoping somebody would mention that. I think that Jaime Jaquez is a ready-made NBA guy. He's not going to be like a superstar or anything, I don't believe, but he can come in and he can be value added to that roster going into free agency, because we know they have some guys coming up for deals, and there's a specific someone in Portland who has expressed interest in playing there. But we know that Jaquez is going to be there going forward. I think it was a good pick.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil too much and whatnot, because this was Ryan's proposal as a loser, but I agree with you in terms of the fit for Jaime. I think he's a good fit there. I think his play style, I think the college coaching that he got from Mick is going to be pretty congruent with what he's going to get in Miami.
Yeah.
And I have a sneaky suspicion that Ryan did not pick them as losers because of the pick itself. So I'm going to go over to Ryan. Talk to me, bud. Tell me why the Heat are losers.
Yeah, I mean, I like Jaquez. I think it's a blind spot in my evaluation of him. I did not like him last year when he was considering coming out, and he pulled his name from the draft. And I think that has biased me when I watched him this year, and that's just my own mental issues I have. So I agree with what you're. Yeah, one of many. I like the fit. I think some of the talks about Heat culture are a little overblown. I think that becomes such a nebulous term a lot of the time, where it's like, oh, they just drink the Kool-Aid and they become great players.
Like the Patriots used to be, right?
Yeah. Like you just show up and suddenly you're more athletic. That's not how it. I will say the Heat have done a great job. They do have a great development structure. I mean, we clearly shown success in that, and every undrafted free agent probably wants to go there to have a chance. My issue is I think it is they're not that good. And the pick of Jaquez is like, we're good. Let's get this guy who's going to contribute for the next 2-3 years, and we're going to get him. He's going to be in his peak on his rookie contract, roughly, right? Like that's so you're getting the deal of that. I think Jaquez is probably a better shooter than he showed in college because he had to do everything for UCLA. So I'll give him credit. He's probably percentage-wise is probably a better shooter than the college numbers show. I think he does have a game that the Heat like. I feel like from a process side, if you're like, hey, we're good, we made it to the finals, we've been a competitive team, we're a playoff team, why not just trade down and get 2 guys in the second round? Because you could easily do that. That second round was full of talent that could contribute and do that. I just think they're not that good, and they think they are. And they need to make more moves. So maybe the Dame move, and I don't feel so bad about it. But I think this shows a lack of sight into the future of what will likely, I think, be a team that collapses with not enough talent.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, they were the 8 seed. I mean, they had to win to get the 8 seed for a reason, right? They got pretty fortunate against the Bucks that Giannis got hurt. They drew the Knicks, and the Knicks were a completely different team from one round to the next. And in the Celtics, I still fully believe that if Jason Tatum doesn't hurt his foot on the first play of the game, they probably make history, and they're the first to come back from 3-0. So it does feel like you're probably pretty close to ground truth there, Ryan, with the fact that it's a little bit of kind of a false sense of security, right? Or false sense of pride, or false sense of, hubris, right? Maybe it's hubris that you've been in 2 out of the last 3 finals. Fine. One of them was in the bubble. Kind of weird, right? The Lakers won that, and a lot of people talk about kind of what that means and the shooting environment, etc. Maybe it definitely feels like this is a pick you make because you feel like your roster is just about complete, right? I agree with that completely, for sure. I don't hate the pick. I don't know that I would call them losers. I think I'd have them kind of in the middle, right? I don't know that they won. I don't know that they lost. This felt like a pick that was kind of a ho-hum pick. And maybe I'm leaving them kind of in the middle because I'm waiting for that next ball to drop, right? I'm waiting for that Dame trade because that seems like, from the surface, it seems like that's kind of the likelihood, right? Would you have made a bit of a different determination on their draft if they had traded on draft night for Dame? I have to assume yes, but I just want to hear you say it.
Yeah, I mean, if the commitment is we're going to, because they need to move guys, right? They have contractual issues with like Hero and those guys. They definitely have the possibility to do that. I think that's something they're going to try to do, as they should. So it's more an incomplete than like they're losers, because if Dame gets brought in, then okay, I get it, right?
Sure.
It makes the most sense to me. But were there guys that could be included in a Dame trade at that point that have higher ceilings to other teams? Probably. I mean, looking on my board, I had like about 15 guys that I liked more than Jaquez. And you're going to have to give up something for Dame.
Yeah.
Is Jaquez something that every team wants? Maybe NBA teams like him a lot more than I do because, he's going to be a contributor, and I think he'll have a good career. I think, again, from a process, they're not that good. And to become good, you have to have assets. Mm-hmm. And is Tyler Hero and some first enough to get Dame? Like, I don't know. I just feel like you could have got somebody like, say, Cam Whitmore, who people would have really liked. And I think, like, hey, that guy, like, we'll take a flyer on him because we're rebuilding if we're the Blazers, right? Like, sure. Cam Whitmore and Scoot Henderson, I would love that combo. Right. That's just my thought process is it feels like they're doing 2 things at once. And I would like to see them commit to something.
Can I offer a rebuttal?
Yeah, absolutely can.
The East is not going to be as good next year as it was this year. And they've been to 2 out of the last 3 NBA finals.
Yeah.
Why can't they win now?
Oh, I mean, like I think I said in a previous pod, if you told me they have like a 5% chance to win the championship, I go, maybe. Like, that's not terrible. And I guess I guess what can you do at 17 to move the needle? Is Jaquez the guy? Like, I just feel like get the best asset possible if you're going to try and trade, which it looks like that's what they're trying to do. I agree. Yeah. Get the best asset. Is Jaquez the guy that Portland wants? I don't think so.
Probably not.
That's how I view it. I guess you shouldn't draft a guy knowing he might be traded. Like, oh, we're going to trade this guy. I think I get philosophically not doing that. But I think from an asset collection standpoint, Miami doesn't have a ton. and you could have hit somebody with a ceiling. If Portland's going to rebuild, they want ceiling guys, not guys who are going to like Jaquez could show up in Portland, and be like their second best player, and it's like, oh great, like that. But what does that do for him? You know what I mean? That's just my. Yeah. I feel like it's two lanes, and I hope they commit. I do agree the East will be weaker, and they can make a run because I love to watch them get beat by Denver.
All right, let's move on. Speaking of the East, and maybe one of those teams that's not going to be as good as they were this year. The Celtics, however, are draft winners. Splash or trash. Ryan, let's go your way first.
Well, I think because I said they were winners, I'm going to splash. This was, again, my contribution to this. I think this is a couple things. I think they made a great trade to get Kristaps. I think that's a good move. I think it reminds me of Lot, and this didn't turn out so well, so maybe this won't sound great, but it reminds me of the Russell Westbrook trade to Houston. And when Daryl Morey, who was the GM at the time, he said, they asked him, why would you do this, right? You had Chris Paul. Why would you trade this? Marcus Smart's not Chris Paul, but, you have this guy who's a contributor and you flipped him for more assets to get Russell Westbrook. It increases the variability of your options in that you will have higher successes and lower lows. And Kristaps provides that, right? He has injury concerns. But if you get last year's Kristaps, this is an incredible trade, right? I think it's great. So that's part of it because that has to be part of their draft because a lot of these picks they traded were in this draft. And I also love Jordan Walsh. I think Jordan Walsh is like a very Boston-y guy. I think he struggled at Arkansas for a variety of reasons. Arkansas didn't have a lot of shooting around him, but I think he's a guy who's gonna give you 110% like coaches love. He can defend like four positions, which they're gonna love in Boston. I think his shot is going to get there. And I think getting him in the second round, a guy who I think a lot of people had first round grades on, like into the first round. And at some points early in the season, college season, they had lottery grades on Jordan Walsh. And some people say he should have came back, and then probably got in the first round next year. But I love the pick. I just think the Kristaps is one of the big wins of the draft, even though it did not take place during the draft. It was heavily influenced by the draft. So that's really where my thought process is there.
Bentley, you agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I agree. The KP move was big for them. Adding depth to their front court, which is injury ridden all the time. I guess Horford's not really injury ridden, but he was terrible in the playoffs and is old. So adding KP is really big for them, kind of solidify that front court. He can be an offensive star at times and also a defensive star at times. But he's not even going to have to be a star in Boston because they have two other guys there that are really, really good at basketball. And I really like Jordan Walsh. I thought that he was asked to do things that were not his strong suits at Arkansas in the must-bust system there. He also was surrounded by a lot of talent, like a lot of talented guys on the Arkansas team. Like if he had played somewhere else or he had been like asked to be the guy, I think he probably could have upped his draft stock. But he went to Arkansas to win, and they won a lot of games. So good for him. I like the pick. I like the trade. I think Boston had a pretty good offseason. Now if they can just figure out how to call timeouts, I think that they will be a better team next year.
Yeah, Brad Stevens needs to be back on the sideline.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, I'm kind of up and down on the Celtics in terms of this draft versus this offseason and kind of where it falls because, the Marcus Smart trade happened, but it also involves a lot of assets in future years as well. So do I count that as a negative on their grade here? I think I can't necessarily because it wasn't directly like the KP trade was more directly involved in this year's draft. So, I tried to weigh that out when Ryan, when you sent the Celtics in the chat, and I think I'm neutral on them. I think I landed at about neutral, but I will caveat this with if they get last year's KP, if they get 60 to 65 regular season games and he's healthy for the playoffs, I do think that this could be a big win for them because as Bentley put it, right, Al Horford, there are roaches in the rafters younger than him and probably more athletic than him. And he is a liability. When he's not hitting threes, he's a liability for that team because he doesn't give you a whole lot else like he used to. He's just not that guy he used to be. And if KP can be that guy alongside Tatum and Brown, maybe you don't worry too much about the Marcus Smart trade because KP's an eraser on help defense, right? When he's right, he's an eraser on, off-ball defense. So I'm with you on the fact that this KP trade has a lot of potential upside. I'm a little bit neutral on the draft because maybe I'm a little biased. I don't trust KP to stay healthy. I just think that I've been burnt by him thinking he was going to be the answer in Dallas, thinking he was going to be great with the Knicks, thinking he was going to help the Wizards kind of get over the hump next to Bradley Beal. And I know it's not a fair shake for him because Beal was hurt a lot last year, but I'm still maybe just a little jaded by his health concerns. So I'm gonna leave the jury out. I'm gonna stay neutral, but I do see a lot of potentially really big upside with KP there in Boston. Because I'm asking to be the guy.
Can I add one more thing? I also wanted to say Boston had a lot of first round picks, right? They kept trading back, moving, like pushing salary down the line. I think getting into the early second round is a good salary move as well. So I'm going to give that also as a positive. I think more teams should have done that because there were teams that were willing to take on with the new CBA. The second round picks are going to become more valuable because of their salaries. So I think moving there with them having basically 3 maxes, they pretty much need second rounders to fill the team out. So I think that made a lot of sense. And getting a guy who I had a first round grade on in the second round, I think is a good salary move and a good value move. So.
Yeah, that's a savvy move for sure. All right, let's swing back to the other side. The Mavs are draft losers. Bentley, I'm going your way first. You proposed this, buddy. Splash of trash here. I know you're splash on this, but tell us
why. So two, I guess 3 reasons why, right? So number 1, Derek Lively. He was the number 1 recruit coming out of high school. He came on late in the season for Duke last year. I think he really stepped it up. You mentioned that KP is an eraser on the defensive end, playing help defense. Lively is an eraser at every level, playing defense. The kid is athletic enough to stand in front of guards. At least he was in college. We'll see how that plays in the NBA, but I have faith. And I think that his offensive game will come along. Ryan and I have talked a lot about him. He has more perimeter skills than were showcased. And you can play him alongside another big because he did it in college. So if the Mavs, another reason why they're a winner, want to play him and the guy's name who I'm forgetting, Richaun Holmes, if they want to play him and Richaun Holmes together on the court at the same time, because Luka just generates so much offense by himself, they can do that. They can play a big lineup with those guys and like Kleba or someone else, And the third reason why they're a draft winner, they traded the Bertans contract. Old Davis just robbing teams left and right. Shout out the Wizards for paying multiple mortgages there. So I obviously a little biased because the Duke player thing, but I thought that they really improved their overall talent level, and they dumped salary cap. So I think they're a winner.
Yeah, and I originally had losers up here because I first said they were losers. You said they were winners, and I understand if you're looking simply at good Lively. If you could tell me they're going to get 90% of the time they're going to get good Lively, fine, they're winners here. But for a large portion of last year, he was not good at all, and in fact, he was at times a huge liability for that Duke team who lost a lot of games they shouldn't have lost because they were really bad in crunch time. They were really bad on offense, and they were really relying on the number 1 recruit in the nation to be better than he was. Mm-hmm. So I have less faith that Lively's going to come in and be that guy for Dallas. I also don't think that Omax has a big upside either. He's a 4-year college guy who was pretty good, but never really flashed as hey, this guy's got next level star potential. So for me, it's the two players that I look at, and I could eat my words very, very easily on this because, Lively comes into the league and he starts to remember that he's a good basketball player, right? Like he did down the stretch of last season. If that's the guy they get, this draft could be a lot better for them and it'd be a lot more in line with what you're saying. But for me, I just don't trust the two guys that they drafted to be those guys. And I thought they really needed to hit, in my opinion, home runs in the draft because one, of that roster, two, that Kyrie Irving's hanging over their head. This isn't a good roster, right? Getting rid of that Bertans contract, huge for them because that was going to strap them even more in terms of being able to replenish this roster in the offseason. They don't have much around Luka. Maybe Luka, the way that he can kind of be that floor general for them, you get Lively with a little less pressure on him. He can be that guy. But for me, the Mavs are losers, and it's mostly because I don't trust the two guys that they drafted, on top of the fact that that's already a roster that I have a lot of questions about. Ryan, what are your thoughts on the Mavs? Winners, losers? Be the tiebreaker here, bud. Or you can just stay neutral and like hit the tie all around.
I abstain. I think I know I'm going to splash them as winners. If I was going to pick the team that made the best moves in totality, it might be the Mavericks. I haven't actually looked at every single move made, but it might be the Mavericks. I've questioned some of their moves with Luka in the past, but I think this was a masterclass of how to deal with the draft and get what you want. First of all, the Bertans trade, not only do they get rid of the contract, they also still get their guy who I believe they wanted at 10. So that's a positive, right? They probably thought they had a higher grade than most people do on him, and the fit made a lot more sense. I think they telegraphed that they wanted him, and the fact that they telegraphed that they wanted him and still were willing to trade back means they had a lot of confidence that no one was coming in front, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone kind of thought that's who they wanted, right? Wherever they were going to be. Getting the trade exception from the Bertans trade and then bringing Holmes into that, who I like as an offensive center. And now you have two centers, like full-size centers, one very good defensive center, I think, in Lively, and one good offensive center. It provides you some versatility at the 5. I think that's big, and it gives them $5 million extra this year because they only took back 12 of the 17 million, I believe. The thing I will say about Lively and his time at Duke, and Billy knows I talked about Lively a lot while he was at Duke. There were many times I brought up to Bentley, why are they doing what they're doing to him at Duke? I think he became disenfranchised from the offense, and that leads to effort issues, that leads to defensive issues. Like, well, I'm not chasing this guy around because I'll never see the ball again. Like, we've all played basketball. You want to touch it every now and then. You want to show what you can do every now and then, right? And they just didn't have a team that played well to his skills. He's a great rim runner. He's a good vertical spacer. He hypothetically could be a little bit of a shooter. And I think we've seen a little bit of that potential is there. He is a great shot blocker. He's got a little bit of an outside game, like I said, that people aren't seeing. And Duke just didn't show any of that. It was like, hey, Kyle Filipowski, he's gonna do his thing, which is fine. Like, that was mostly effective, but I think it really disenfranchised Lively and it caused him to have effort issues. Now, it'd be great if a guy gave 100% effort all the time, no matter if he's getting the ball or not, but that's just not how the world works. And I think Luka in the pick and roll is going to give him the ball and let him score easy baskets, and that's really going to enfranchise him, and he's going to put in a lot more effort. Personally, that's what I think, because you don't become the number one player in high school unless you put in a little bit of effort. It's not like the guy's lazy, right? As far as we know. So that's my opinion on the effort issue, and I love the moves. I also think Omax is a good move for them. I think he's kind of a Dorian Finney-Smith light on a rookie deal, which is great for them. He shoots the ball well. He defends. I think he's got like a 7'1" wingspan. He's 6'8". He played at Marquette. We all know how those guys at Marquette play. I think he's going to fit really well into like a rotational wing 3-and-D guy that they can bring along. And because he's a little older, I think he can contribute right away and give. If he gives 80 to 90% of what Dorian Finney-Smith gave, they're going to be ecstatic at that spot. And I think by the end of the season, we could see that. So,
yeah, I've seen the comparisons, and they make sense. They make sense. Maybe I'm just not confident they're going to get what they think they're going to get out of him because of the build and the effort and the energy on both ends of the floor seem to match with what Dorian Finney-Smith is. Hopefully they get that, right? I love when Cubes is on national TV because he's fun, right? Luka's fun to watch. I want to see him on national TV more. So I really do hope that they work out for them. I just, we're agreeing to disagree here. I don't love the picks as much as you guys do, but you make a good point, Ryan, with Jon Scheyer and his rookie struggles. My brother's a big Duke fan. I think I've mentioned that before when we've been chatting. And about halfway through the year, he was like, "Man, I don't know if Shirer's cut out for it," right? And I think he was sort of on the brink of like, oh, maybe Coach K made the wrong choice in terms of who's gonna replace. And then of course they get hot at the end of the year and make the run in the ACC tournament and tough loss to Tennessee. But I think a lot of people were expecting them to make a deeper run in the tournament as well. So we'll see. Like I said, I hope so because I like watching Cubes and I like his antics on the sidelines, and I like watching Luka on national TV. Whatever gets him on TV more, I'm 100% in for.
Yep.
All right, shift over to the Grizz. Ryan, passing your way. Splash or trash on the Grizzlies as draft winners.
Oh man, that when I saw that, I was confused. That's what I'll say. Which is fine. I'm confused a lot. It's really weird, right? Again, I think I don't hate like almost anybody's drafts holistically. I don't hate anybody's. Memphis, I love the G.G. Jackson pick. As y'all know, I took him at 20 in our mock draft, and he went 45 to Memphis.
He's a lottery pick if he plays one more year of college, too.
Yeah, he's just got a lot of issues with maturity. And it's like this could be
up a year ahead of time, too, right? So that's
he's super young. Yeah, he's still 18. I mean, not the most mature guy in the world. Clearly, I think he had some bad workouts. So that also shows probably some maturity issues because you should probably like do well in like workouts that are kind of designed to do well in. So I love that pick. I think that's great, especially at that spot. I think that's great value. What I will say is Tarek Biberovic. Didn't have him on my board. It's like a very Memphis thing to take a guy I don't expect. When they took Santi Aldama at the end of the first, I was like, that's like the 50th best guy in this draft, and now he's like a contributor on that team. So maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about, and maybe Tarek Biberovic is a stud and going to contribute to that team. But I had to actually look him up because I was like, where do guys have him? Like, because I'm involved in the Twitter draft world. I see what a lot of people say and watch a lot of tape and stuff. And one guy was like, I had him outside of my 150. Like he ranked him. He was outside. he was like 180th, and I was like
151.
First of all, it's impressive that this guy is rating 200 players. He's like, this guy will be great in the ACB, like that's literally what he's doing. And I was like, oh man, well that's maybe a reach. I will reserve judgment on that because I don't know anything about the guy, and I don't think if I watched him play, I don't remember watching him play. I think you're probably taking this like you like the Marcus Smart move as well. I like the Marcus Smart move because it gives them a lot of positional versatility at the guard positions. And obviously without Ja, it'll be good for them for a little while. Without Ja, he can be the primary ball handler. With Ja, he can be the secondary ball handler. He can defend like up to the 3 and some smaller 4s. He can defend the lead guard. I think that's important because Ja's not, the most amazing defender. So I do like that move a lot, and I don't think they gave up a lot to get him. So this is really hard, right? I'm going to say splash because I like the Jackson trade, and I do like the Marcus Smart trade. I'm not a huge Marcus Smart fan, but I like his fit with the Grizzlies and the way they play and what they need. I'm just I'll again reserve judgment for Biberovic, and I hope he's a stud just so I can be dumb again.
Yeah, I'll be completely honest. I sort of cheated this for the exact opposite reason. I didn't count it for the Celtics because Smart is an immediate contributor for the Grizzlies, whereas the Celtics got back future assets, right? So that's kind of why I included the Smart here for me in terms of the Grizz being winners. I love the Smart's fit. I love the positional versatility. I love that he can guard 4 positions, 5 in smaller lineups. When they're facing smaller lineups, he can guard everybody on the floor. But the biggest thing for me that Marcus Smart is going to bring to Memphis is a guy that's going to be in Ja's ass all the time. He is a guy who was the clear leader in Boston, the guy who was the locker room guy in Boston, and to see how broken up and beaten up Brad Stevens was in that press conference when he was talking about how difficult that trade was to make, that tells me everything I need to know in terms of a guy that's going to be able to really take Ja and mature him, get him off of the stupid shit that he's been on, keep him on the floor. And that might be the biggest thing that Memphis did in this offseason for them, for their future, because Ja is clearly the face of that franchise. Ja was on the brink of being the face of the league, and he blew that. And now he's got an opportunity with a guy coming in who's a high character guy, high effort, great defender, all the things that he brings on the floor, plus the contributions he's going to make in terms of leadership in that locker room. For me, GG Jackson being a steal in the second round aside, in my opinion, the Grizz were winners because of that move. And I know it's a little bit of a, like I said, it's a little bit of cheating, but I think because it's an immediate contribution and it was in such close proximity to draft day, I lumped it in here. But GG Jackson was a middle of the first round talent, in my opinion, mid to late mid of the first round. And you had him, I think you said 20 on your draft board. I had him at like 18 or 19, something like that. It didn't fit with a couple of the teams I had in terms of where I was slotted to draft, but I love his talent. I love his ability to play both ends of the floor. And I fully believe he's a lottery pick next year, or maybe even like a top 5 guy if he went one more year in college. So Biberovic, whatever he's going to be, maybe he's going to be a contributor, but I didn't consider him anywhere, during the draft process either. So that pick, I'll reserve judgment just like you, Ryan. But I love the Marcus Smart move so much that I had to lump the Grizzlies here as winners for it. Bentley, any dissenting thoughts? Any agreement, disagreement? What do you think?
I'm typically one to be a contrarian. I don't know how to do that in this instance. I hope that Biberovic is really good because I want to get out ahead of it and just start calling him Bibby. I haven't seen a second of that guy play basketball.
Nope, wasn't on my radar.
So I love the Marcus Smart trade for them. I don't think he's as good of a player maybe as some people think that he is. But he's a locker room guy, and he's going to be, like you said, just on Ja all the time, trying to keep him, on the straight and narrow, basically. And GG Jackson, kid has the potential to be a superstar, right? Like he just does. He's got the body. He's got the talent. He's got to learn how to be a winner. That's all there is to it. And they win a lot in Memphis. They have a really good coach. And I think that if he gets enough playing time, he could potentially sneak into like their closing lineups. Probably not, but he has the potential. Like you run out Ja, Bane, Smart, GG Jackson, and then Triple J. Like that's a lineup that will see the floor this year, I'm sure. If Steven Adams comes back, he probably goes in at the 5 in the closing lineup. But GG Jackson will definitely see the floor this year, and I'm excited for that. So I'd say Splash their winners.
Excellent. Sneaky pick got in there, but got some likes across the board. All right. Let's move over to the Thunder. Splash or trash, and we just happen to be on you here, Bentley. So splash here, but tell me why.
I think there's some redundancy in the pick that they made, taking the point guard out of Kentucky, whose name literally just escaped me. Yeah, Cason Wallace. So a few years back when Chris Paul was there, they ran the triple guard lineup and they made the first round of the playoffs. I can understand it, I guess, if that's your thought process there. I watched a decent amount of Kentucky this year, and I mean, I'd like Wallace. I didn't think he was super great. Now, that being said, I'm not a fan of Cal and the way he coaches the team. So potentially there was some limiting factors with him because of the coaching. But they have guards and ball handlers already in Oklahoma City. Like, I don't think that's like – yeah, like, I'm not sure that that's really where I would have gone. There's some guys that went after him that I think just make a little bit more sense. But, I mean, you're kind of throwing darts at the board here, just trying to pick a guy who's going to develop into something special. And if they think that he's going to develop into that, then awesome, good for them. It's just I'm down on them for this draft pick. And they got the Bertans contract, so losers.
Ryan, what do you think?
So I had Cason Wallace at 9 on my board. I actually had him above Anthony Black, who I had 10 on my board.
Wrong.
Yeah, maybe. I think I talked about in the draft when we did our mock. I liked him a lot. Like Bentley said, Kentucky's kind of weird with their guards. So Golden State's drafting for depth there, right? I think did I say Golden State? Oklahoma City. Golden State drafting for Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City, they drafting for depth there. What makes Oklahoma City special is get people who can handle the ball at all spots, get people who can defend, make you super versatile positionally. You can switch everything. And Cason Wallace fits perfectly into that. And so I'm going to trash this. I think it was a good pick. I think the Thunders I actually have an interesting – there's a conspiracy theory about Bertans that I want to throw out real quick.
Let's see it.
So the Bertans pick is – the Bertans contract is kind of a middling contract, right? It's like $17 million. Oklahoma City does not have a lot of contracts in that range, right? So people are of the opinion that because Bertans is at that level and then only $5 million guaranteed next year, a lot of people who want to shed salary and get off a star will take back Bertans because he's so cheap next year. Mm-hmm. It's almost like an expiring because he's only making $5 million next year, right? And with all of Oklahoma City's first round picks, because I think they have like 600 over the next 4 years or something like that.
Close, yeah. Give or take 1 or 2.
Yeah, roughly estimated.
Yeah. This allows them some flexibility that they didn't have before in matching salaries and trades. So I think, Presti is the genius that he is. He probably realizes that. So I think it's maybe better than it looks. And I like the pick. So I'm going to trash. I don't think it's like amazing. I would say if I would grade it, it's like a B, like B- probably. But, that's not bad.
Yeah, I'm going to trash this too, but I'm not going to go as far as to say I think they're draft winners necessarily. Ryan, you make a good point that I didn't think about with the Bertans contract. That's, probably there's always some, form of truth to a conspiracy theory, right? It's founded in some sort of truth that somebody interpreted one way or another. But if anybody's going to make that move, it's probably Presti, right? Him and maybe 2 or 3 other GMs in the NBA are that savvy, right? He's just always seems to win with trades, always seems to make the right moves and push the right buttons. But, we're still seeing Oklahoma City's got, the 600 draft picks first round picks over the next couple of years. What are they going to do with them? I also think that this pick comes down to how confident they are that Chet Holmgren's going to come back and be Chet, right? I would have thought if they had any concerns about him being back that they would have gone, maybe even the guy that they picked and traded to Dallas would have been a decent fit there with Lively, right? But I think this tells a little more in terms of the health evaluations that they've gotten from their medical staff on Chet, and having that interchangeability at guard and potentially playing 3 guards in a lineup. And I think they've got decent size with Shea. He can kind of be a little more versatile on the bigger end, playing maybe with the pseudo 3, right? I don't hate their draft. I do think Cason Wallace is a guy that I'm going to withhold a little bit of judgment on him, but Kentucky point guards who didn't have, as much playing time or as much focal, they weren't as much the focal point in terms of being the general of the offense. As Bentley said, right? Cal has a weird coaching style for college, wins a lot of games, but it seems to maybe stunt a little bit of that in-school growth of some of the players. They seem to get to the league and then a lot of them take off, right? And they play really well in the NBA once they get to a place that's going to highlight and accentuate and help them grow. So maybe that's what they're going to get with him, and they're going to hit a home run with that pick. I'm going to withhold judgment, but I do, I like the moves that they're making, and I like what it tells me about a guy that I want to see him play. I want to see Chet play because I liked watching him at Gonzaga, and I want to see him actually play in the NBA with some regularity.
He's on the summer league team. They announced it.
Yeah. I did see that news. So that tells me that they feel pretty good about the medicals. So let's get Chet on the floor, and if it's another guard that plays, it's another guard that plays. All right. Let's shift over to one of our hometown fan favorite teams.
Yeah, Ryan. Go baby. Let's go.
Ryan, gonna start with you, buddy. Talk to me about your Rockets. Splash or trash. They're winners in this draft.
What even needs to be said? We can all sit here silently and realize the serendipitous masterclass that was the Houston Rockets draft. They take who I think was the best fit and the best spot there, Amen Thompson at 4, and then from 10 all the way to their pick at 20, they try to trade up, and no one trades with them. Indiana also trying to trade up. No one trades with them. People like Jaime Jaquez were taken before this player. Then they get who I had at number 7 on my board, and some people had as high as 4 and 5, Cam Whitmore at 20. This is a clear splash, and I think, again, the higher ceiling guys make a lot of sense. The Rockets are not ready to compete. They're in a transitional phase, but that transitional phase is still a couple years. This makes a lot of sense for them. They need a shooting. They need athleticism. If I get to see the lineup of Amen Thompson, Jalen Green, and Cam Whitmore all together, I mean, that athleticism, I might retire just to watch that on repeat. Just homeless with
PPJ in the chamber.
Yeah. I mean, they're just freakishly athletic, oozing with potential. I love it. That's what you need when you're in a spot like that. Again, a lot of it is serendipitous. They got lucky that Cam Whitmore fell to them. They probably would have traded out of the pick, I think, if he wasn't there, because there weren't a lot of other guys they liked. Yeah, I think it's a clear win, and I'm super excited to see it.
Yeah, I like Cam Whitmore so much. I ended up taking Hendricks, who I like a little more, at 4 in our mock draft. It was him or Cam Whitmore that I was going to take for Houston, just based on roster composition. I thought a nice wing guy was going to be the right fit for them. I'm not as big on Amen as you are. I'm not as big on Amen as a lot of people are, clearly, with where he went and all the mock drafts that had him 4, 5, 6, I think was kind of the consensus on where he would go. I just don't know that he's ever going to develop into a shooter. Maybe you end up getting like a Russell Westbrook type, and that's fine, right? But I just don't see that as his ceiling. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong for your sake, right? For the Houston Rockets' sake. But I don't call them losers because I love the Whitmore pick. I think they got maybe the most value of any pick in the first round at number 20 with Cam Whitmore. It's hard to look anywhere else and say, yeah, there's better value there because he's so good. I thought he was a top 5 talent. The medicals I know were a little bit of a concern, but when you've got the opportunity, like the Rockets should have sprinted right with the card. That pick should have been in 2 seconds after they got on the clock. I know TV time doesn't allow them to do that, but that's such a good pick for them at 20, honestly, for that roster. So I'm in between because how I feel about Amon versus how I feel about Cam. I got them neutral. I'm not going to call them losers. I think they did fine. Bentley, what do you think about the Rockets, man?
I think they're winners here. The Amon pick was the best you're gonna do there, and then Whitmore obviously a steal. There's potential for them to have drafted like not going to say the 2 best players, but like they could come out with this. They could come out in like 3 years and be like, we had the best draft, right? Like it's possible for that to be a thing. I think that Amon, if he continues on the trajectory that people are expecting, is going to be a perfect fit for them because he'll be like a big guard that runs the point for them, which is kind of becoming a recurring thing in the Western Conference. And Whitmore, I mean, what more can you say about Whitmore? The dude he didn't win a lot in college, but he has a lot of upside on the offensive side of the ball, at least. And that's a team that can score a lot of points. If Jabari Smith can remember how to shoot the ball, they could spray it around. And if Jalen Green learns how to pass the ball, they could become a very lethal offense. I think their defense will be fine. Ime tends to galvanize players into playing defense. So I think they're winners. I definitely think they're winners. Again, they potentially could have had the best draft night of any team.
Yeah, you mentioned the not winning a lot in college. He had the misfortune of, happening to commit to Villanova right before Jay Wright decided he was going to retire. One of the best college coaches to ever do it. And you happen to, commit to Villanova because of what he did for that program. And he retires and gets to talk about you on TV. So, that's unfortunate, but yeah, I agreed completely. Cam Whitmore, the upside. And if Amon proves me wrong, right, and becomes the guy that everybody thinks he's going to be, I would agree with you, Bentley. It's possible that we look back on this draft in 2027 and say, holy fuck, the Rockets built their core in the 2023 NBA draft with adding these 2 players to what they've already got. And whoever it is out of those 3 that are already there, whoever sticks in this roster, if that's what it becomes, and that's their big 3, man, you hit a fucking grand slam in a draft getting 2 of those guys. So for sure. All right. Let's move on. The Charlotte Hornets, who, like the Houston Rockets, had a bit of bad luck when it comes to the draft odds, right? They just happened to get the second pick right behind Vic. Houston, who I believe, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, had the best odds going into the lottery.
Second best.
Right?
Pistons had the best odds. I mean, the odds are flat. It's just your floor is lower based off top 5. So.
And Houston ends up right behind the big 3 of the draft, and Charlotte ends up right behind the big 1 of the draft. I don't like what they did. I'll jump in real quick on this. I don't like what they did because I thought Scoot was the better pick than Brandon Miller. I thought Scoot fit that roster better than Brandon Miller as well. I thought putting Scoot next to LaMelo would have been a perfect fit for them, having those 2 guards that, the size, the ability to create, the ability to score, the ability to attack the rack, I think is a brilliant combination you could have had. I think Brandon Miller is more of a complementary piece long term in terms of his NBA career. I think he'll have a fine career. I think he's going to stick. I think he's going to play 10, 12 years and be a contributor somewhere. But at number 2, I don't think that that's what you're looking for. And it felt like to me, maybe more so than ever with the Hornets, they went with the safe pick here early in the first round. I just don't look at Brandon Miller and say that guy's got a ceiling that's up in the same trajectory as I think Scoot has, right? And I went on record saying I do think that Scoot is going to have the best pro career out of this draft because I don't trust Vic's health. So I may be a little biased in saying this and judging the Hornets for their pick, But I just look at what they could have had with Scoot next to LaMelo, and God, that could have been a great combination for the next 5, 10, 12 years. And you build around that. That's your core. High ceiling guys and potentially stars next to each other. I think they made up for it a little bit with their later picks, but I think they missed badly enough, in my opinion, at number 2 that I have them as losers on this. I kind of like the Nick Smith pick. Najee, I think, has some potential in terms of, being raw, but God, I look at Brandon Miller versus where I think Scoot's going to end up long term, and I got Charlotte as losers. Bentley, what are your thoughts on Charlotte?
So Charlotte, we all know their history of picking second or picking the guy right behind the guy. Yep. That's probably what happened here. Although they had an opportunity to buck that trend in taking Scoot, and they didn't do it. And then they took, another guard who was hurt and underperformed in college to kind of what I assume would be make up for not taking Scoot, so they can slide him into that role. And then Najee, you just pick, hope he's got the upside, hope he's going to perform and be able to play, right? He's not going to be expected to play big minutes for them. They have Mark Williams there. So it's fine. I don't necessarily dislike anything that they did. So I'm kind of middle of the road here. I don't necessarily think they were a winner or a loser. Of the 3 picks that we're discussing here, the Nick Smith was my least favorite. But he's a pedigree guy, like big time recruit coming out of high school. Smart teams often draft guys based off of pedigree and not necessarily college performances. So it's fine. I'm not the biggest Nick Smith guy, but I'm not a GM, so what do I know really? But I hate to be middle of the road, but I'm kind of middle of the road here for Charlotte. It was fine.
Ryan, what do you think about Charlotte?
Yeah, I'm kind of middle of the road too, but I'm gonna say fuck them and say splash their draft losers, because somebody has to be a loser. This is a black and white world, only winners and losers. And Charlotte is a loser.
You're first, you're last.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ricky Bobby's in the lead. Okay, so I have some opinions. Brandon Miller, I'm fine with the pick. I disagree, but I see why they did it. If your evaluation is he makes more sense with LaMelo, he fits the team. I agree with you. I would prefer a ceiling pick there, but they took the floor pick. I think that's okay. They have a lot of ceiling guys. LaMelo is their ceiling guy, but I understand that to some extent. I don't hate on them for that. I disagree, but I don't hate. I'm not saying they're losers because of that. The Nick Smith pick, I actually am kind of in the middle on the Nick Smith pick. I like it in a vacuum. I think if him and LaMelo play in the backcourt, it's going to be awful. There might be the worst defensive backcourt in the league. He's not going to start in the backcourt, because they rely on Rozier to guard a lot of other actual good guards offensively, and I don't think you can play all 3 of those guys together. So that, maybe he's like a 6-man type guy for them for a little while and develop. So I don't hate it. I can see where it fits in, but I don't see how you can play those guys together, and LaMelo plays a lot. Side note, how is LaMelo 6'7" and such an awful defender? Just put your arms in front of the guy.
Just doesn't play. We talk about it on this show, man. There's a big difference between being a bad defender, but being a willing defender, and being a bad defender and an unwilling defender.
Maybe on a better team, he's a serviceable defender. I don't know. The James Najee pick, I hate. I like James Najee. I don't hate where he's picked. I hate him on Charlotte. Charlotte has Mark Williams, who is a rim protecting big, who I think actually has a little bit of ball game, on ball game more than people think he does, and I think could develop that given the opportunity. He's not going to be this amazing guy, but I think has more creative juice than people give him credit for, and I think is a better rim protector than Najee. Obviously, they draft him way higher. They also have Nick Richards, who I think is a contributor and does the exact same thing. He's like a not as good Mark Williams. Well, Najee is likely a not as good Nick Richards. So you just have the same guy, just like a worse version. And maybe
all
Najee,
3 tiers of that guy.
Yeah. It may be Najee. It's like he's our third center, and then when like Richards leaves, we play him. Like maybe that's what it is. But I just hate the redundancy. I would like to see some positional flexibility, like a guy who can make a jumper, or maybe like like I said, a pick and pop guy, like at the 5. Allows LaMelo to do some different things. I just think it's so redundant at that position. I know it's a second round pick, but don't like it. Amari Bailey, I like that pick. I think that's a good upside pick. I think he showed some flashes, and he was also a top 10 high school recruit. So, but again, where's that guy going to play? Again, it's a second round pick, but like I don't like the fits, and I don't like the philosophy with Brandon Miller and the lack of ceiling. So that's my opinion on that. I don't think any of them in a vacuum are terrible. I'm just not a fan of them for Charlotte.
Yeah, for sure. Charlotte continues to just feel like a kind of a rudderless ship.
The Amari Bailey pick is, in my opinion, a better pick than the Najee pick. Because if you remember in the tournament last year, Amari Bailey got hurt and UCLA's defense fell apart.
Yeah.
He was like the best defender on that team. So I think he can probably find minutes on Charlotte because they're a bad defensive team. And he's a plus defender. Again, at least he was at high level college basketball. So I kind of like the Bailey pick. But Ryan outlined the Najee stuff pretty well there.
Yeah, I like Bailey better than Najee 100%.
Yeah.
If they took Bailey at 31 and Najee at 41, I'd be like, okay, I don't feel so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you're getting a raw, a potential prospect at any of those spots you're picking in the second round, right?
Excuse me.
It does feel a little duplicitous. I kind of like what Najee is as a player, and I know, Ryan, you said in a vacuum the pick isn't terrible, but the roster composition, I understand. I like Najee, the player, right? But you might be absolutely right. Maybe he never finds minutes on Charlotte, right? Maybe it's the wrong team that drafted him for sure.
Yeah, because Mark Williams is the GOAT.
Yeah.
You got it.
I got a Mark Williams rookie card signed over here somewhere. One
Nice.
day it'll be worth money.
There you go. All right. Ryan, going your way first here. Blazers. Splash or trash? Blazers.
I thought the Blazers had a great draft. I'm going to pull them up real fast just so I can give you my full opinion. Scoot, love the pick. As you know, I think Scoot was the second best prospect. I agree with you, Gary. Chris Murray, love the pick. If he's 80 or 90% of what his brother is, that's a great pick for them because he probably will take Jeremy Grant's spot when he likely doesn't come back because they're going to be rebuilding soon. The pick I really like, I like the Repair pick at 43. I had Repair at my 20s on my draft grade, and I think he's a guy who could turn into a 3-and-D if he develops. His shot's okay, but not amazing. He's a great defender, and you can never have too many of those guys. So I think every pick was great. And now it's really going to come down to what do they do with the team, and they avoided the mistake of drafting Brandon Miller and thinking they would be good, which I talked about in the last pod. I was very concerned about. Scoot was correct. Gives you a lot more options than Brandon Miller would.
Yeah, for sure, I agree. And Portland was one, so I had suggested a couple others as winners. Portland was one that I was considering suggesting as well. I'm glad that they got brought up. Thought they hit well. I thought the Scoot pick, home run. I've made clear my thoughts on Scoot. Repair, second round, 13th pick in the second round too. Like that's incredible value because, like you, Ryan, I had him at first round talent. I had Repair as probably a 22 to 28, right, somewhere in there. Going, I think he has exactly that potential, that 3-and-D. 3-and-D potential. And I think he's on the defensive side. He's got potential to guard 4 positions. I don't think you're going to line him up against your quicker point guards in the league, but I think he can guard 2 through 5 against most lineups in the NBA. And I love the potential with him as a shooter. His jump shot's okay, maybe a little less than average, but I like how comfortable he seems in some of the film that I did see on him. I like how comfortable he seems being able to get to a spot and take a shot and get the shot up. So if he gives you just defense for the first 5 years of his career, I think he's going to be good enough defensively that's a steal at 43. So 100%. Bentley, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think you guys are saying repair. It's clearly Rupert.
Rupert Murdoch.
If you look, if you look,
Oh, not again.
It's Rayman Rupert. That's the way I'm reading it. I don't know. Yeah, I think they had a really good draft night. I said previously that Houston could potentially have 3-4 years from now say they had the best draft. I feel the same way about Portland.
Yep.
They made some really good picks. Scoot obviously is a home run. We don't know what's going to happen with Dame. We don't know who's getting the keys to that kingdom or if he's staying, obviously. So repair has the potential to be a defensive stud, right? Offensively, yet to be seen. Probably leaves a little bit to be desired. But anytime you can get a 19-year-old kid with a 7'3" wingspan who plays hard on defense, not a bad pick, right? And then Murray, yeah, I mean, if he's 75% of his brother, he's going to be a productive player in this league for a while. His brother, who was like the lone shooter in the Sacramento playoff run this year, because everybody else forgot how to shoot jumpers, and then De'Aaron Fox just went to the hole at will. I think Portland did a fantastic job. I'm curious to see next week how we will talk about their team after what could be an exciting weekend for them. But I like it. They're winners for sure. Splash.
Excellent. All right, moving on. This one might get a little sour. Splash or trash. Ryan, I'm going to you first. I'm going to save the Wizards fans for last so that we can torch you for your take. Splash or trash, the Wizards of draft winners.
Clearly, you are too emotionally invested in the team to think clearly, and that's really y'all's problem, because I think they're clear winners. I think people are underrated. Now, I'm looking at this process-wise, and I'm looking at this holistically, right? First thing I'm going to talk about, the Bradley Beal, Kristaps, Chris Paul combo deal they made. I liked what they got out of it a lot more than I think y'all did. I think the picks, whatever, right? Jordan Poole, he's probably an asset that you're probably going to get rid of at some point. I don't see him like contributing to a team that's not very good. Like, he'll put up a lot of shots, but he's not in the right spot to be a contributor. What I do like is you got back Patrick Baldwin Jr. from the Warriors, and you got back Ryan Rollins, but I both had as first-round grades last year. Patrick Baldwin Jr. In college had some issues because he was the only guy on his Milwaukee team, I believe, who played for his dad. But a 6'9" shooter that had a top 10 pedigree in high school, I like that as a flyer for the team that you are about to be, which is not good. And Ryan Rollins.
About to be. We haven't been good in years.
Well, you're going to be worse.
Oh, okay.
Ryan Rollins, I like a lot too. He's a scorer. He's got some foot issues, but I had a first round grade on him. I think he came out of Toledo, and getting him for basically nothing, like just a throw in salary, I think is a good move. Get as many prospects as you can. And now I'll talk about the Coulibaly pick. I think the Wizards were the best spot for Coulibaly to go. And the reason I think that is because his development has been so rapid recently that I think a continuation of that development with playing time is vital. And I think Washington gives him that opportunity where if he's going to realize whatever the potential is, I think Washington in its current state is the best place for him to be, right? If you're talking about variables, his variables are extremely wide. It's not Jarris Walker, it's not Taylor Hendricks. His variables are way higher than probably all those guys, except for maybe Cam Whitmore. Like, that would probably be the only guy. But if you just thought Coulibaly, his medical's better and he's got this crazy potential that you see, and he just needs to get the playing time to show it, great. I think this is the spot, right? So yeah, I love that. I think that's great for them. I think a lot of people are hating on it. And then I also like the Vucevic pick as well. I think he'll be a contributor on the team. But I really like. I think it's good to point the team in the direction that it's going and realize that's the direction you're going and commit to it, because they've been half-assing it for a long time and thinking they could piece together a contender, and it just never materialized for a variety of reasons. So I'm glad to see them commit, and I think that's what makes them a winner. So this is a big splash.
Yeah, I have to admit, right, the emotion is certainly clouding my judgment to a certain extent, right? Because the two guys we got in the draft were two guys that I loved during our mock draft. Right? I literally had the Bilal pick to Indiana and talked about how much I thought his upside was great. And I also highlighted Vucevic at the end of our first round by saying he was a guy that I looked for on, in the second round that could really surprise people, right? I hope so. But, the whole totality of kind of what they did, I don't love it. I don't love it. It feels, like I mentioned with Charlotte, it feels rudderless. I do understand that getting to the bottom is not always as smooth a process as some teams make it look like, right? San Antonio last year, Philly kind of during their process. It's not as easy to bottom out. So, maybe that's sort of what the Washington Wizards fell victim to this offseason. They didn't have the same sort of ability to just tank in its general sense as some of the other teams were fortunate enough to be able to. But I do have to admit, right, upon further consideration of the draft picks themselves, I like both of them. I really do. I just don't like the full direction of the team. So I'm going to upgrade the losers to neutral because of the, how I like the picks themselves. I think, Billy Coulibaly has a really big ceiling. I think that Vucevic could be a surprising guy in round 2, could be a starter long-term for this team. I don't know that he's going to reach, right, that superstar level that we've seen from guys like Jokic and Draymond who go in the second round. But I think he could be a contributor, play a lot of minutes for a team that if the Wizards are able to build it in the next 2 to 3 years, he might be part of that. So I'm neutral in terms of the draft. The offseason has felt really shaky, so I'm not yet ready to call them winners. Bentley, what do you think, bud?
I don't like the things that are happening in Capital One Arena. I haven't for a number of years. I thought that the Beal trade came a year late, excuse me. You see the trades that went out last offseason, specifically Gobert. In today's NBA, Bradley Beal is a more valuable player than Rudy Gobert. He just is. Defensive player of the year be damned. Bradley Beal's a better player than Rudy Gobert, and we did not get a first-round pick for him to speak of. Jordan Poole, we kind of mentioned that when you guys made fun of me for my Boogie Cousins stuff. So he may become the new Boogie Cousins.
You get to watch him.
He's not good enough to be Boogie Cousins. Boogie Cousins was a superstar in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Not a winning player, but an absolute superstar.
Yeah.
Jordan Poole is not that. Jordan Poole is not a superstar. Jordan Poole is not even a star in the NBA. I'm glad that Chris Paul is
shots a game though.
He will take a lot of shots. I'm glad that Chris Paul is not on the roster, mainly for his own sake. In the draft, you two specifically were much higher on Coulibaly than I was. Ryan mentioned his rapid ascension, like his rapid increase in skill. His I forget the word you used because I was just fuming about Washington. His development, his rapid development, right? He was playing in, one of the 5 best leagues in the world, playing alongside the eventual number 1 overall pick, right? He's not going to do that in Washington. He's playing in the toughest league in the world against guys that are obviously much better than him already, and playing with nobody to speak of.
The best Israeli player in the world.
Fair. That is true. Yes, that is true. Yes. I don't know what his role is going to be on this team. He's going to play a lot of minutes because they're going to be really bad. I'm not high on it. I would love to be wrong. Maybe he becomes, Giannis, but a smaller version, right? Like, I would love to be wrong about him. And then, Vucevic or whatever. If he had been picked 41st overall, I would have loved it a lot more. Just given, the recent history of 41st overall draft picks, namely Nikola Jokic. But he was picked at 42nd. Yeah, he was picked at 42nd, so he's probably going to suck.
That's fair.
He's big. He's got some talent. He was the 42nd pick. Like, it just doesn't,
42
Jokic
is a number, though.
Jokic is 1 in a million. If you're picking guys in the second round, you just hope that they can make it to the end of their rookie contract without going down to the G League. I'm not high on anything that Washington is doing. The guys we got back from Golden State in that deal don't move the needle for me at all. If you can't, we all know the flaws that in the recent drafts that Golden State has made, right? Namely with Moody and Kuminga and Wiseman, right? So if you were also included in those same draft classes and you still can't jump those guys in the rotation, what are you doing? Like, I know that Steph he low key runs the show there and he gets the guys that he likes. Kind of another knock. Steph didn't like you guys enough to get on the court. You're not taking minutes away from Steph. You're taking minutes away from, Clay, who is not Clay anymore. Like, I just don't. Gary, you said it's like a rudderless ship, and I agree. Like, I don't know what. Like, we're aiming for the bottom, and we're gonna miss somehow. I don't know. We might win 35 games, which is not going to be enough to be a top, number 1 overall potential. Like, I just don't. I don't know. What are we doing?
Yeah. Feels directionless.
Mm.
All right. Last team we're going to talk about here, and I think this is kind of a sneaky team that nobody wants to give any credit to because of the talent that they've had and traded away several times over the last 4 or 5 years. Splash or trash, the Nets are draft winners. Bentley, I'm going to let you start this one because this is your team.
Yes, absolutely. I love what they did on draft night. The 3 guys that I'm looking at that they picked, Noah Clowney, Derek, however you want to say it, Whitehead, and Jalen Wilson, I watched a lot of this past year. Whitehead, for obvious reasons, played at Duke. Clowney, Alabama was on TV all the time. And Jalen Wilson was on Kansas, who was also on TV all the time, right? Jalen Wilson was the best player on that Kansas team this year. He was a major contributor the year prior when they won the national title. He's a little older, but that's all right. That just means he's experienced and he's a good basketball player, in my opinion. Now, when we're talking about the Wizards, I said pick 42. You're not going to find good guys or whatever in the second round. This kid has played high-level basketball. He's proven it on the big stage. He doesn't really get rattled. I like Jalen Wilson a lot. I had a higher grade on him. If you remember back to our mock draft pod, he was one of my honorable mentions. Whitehead, almost unlimited talent, right? He has a bad tendency to take 2 steps in from the 3-point line and then pull up and take long twos, but he makes a lot of them. If they can kind of break that habit and allow him to be a creator on the offensive side, and his playmaking can come along, I think that he has potential to be a really good scorer in the NBA. They are also going through like a transitionary period in Brooklyn where I don't think they love Cam Thomas because he, you had those like back-to-back 40-point games and then kind of disappeared, right? So I think that Whitehead might be able to slide into that role if they choose to not play Cam a lot. And Clowney, the dude played with Brandon Miller, and there were certain nights where he was the best player on that team. And they have 2 more guys coming out next year, I believe, that likely will be first, potentially second round picks. There was a lot of talent on that Alabama team, and there were numerous games throughout the year where he was the best player on the floor for Alabama. I really like Clowney. I think he has a lot of upside. The dude plays his ass off all the time, and I think that he could potentially be very good, especially playing alongside or even behind the center whose name I now have forgotten once again. I'm really bad at names. Say that again.
Claxton.
Yes, Claxton.
Not to be confused with Speedy Claxton.
Yes, not to be confused. This is Nicholas Claxton.
Same guy. He just got taller.
Yeah, that's what it was. And less fast. I don't. I like their picks. I think they're winners. They're not shooting to aim a ton of they're not shooting to win a ton of games this year. I don't expect. But they've got a lot to work with there with these new 3 guys coming in. So I think they won.
Yeah, we got a good question in the chat we're going to finish up with here in a minute. But Ryan, I want to get your thoughts here. You disagree with the Nets being draft winners?
Yeah, I agree. I won't add too much. What I'll say is that's about where I had those guys on my board within like 4 or 5. I think it kind of gets a little nebulous once you get to the late first, early second, like I talked about in the mock draft. But yeah, I like what Bentley said. I kind of agree with pretty much everything he said, which is a rarity. So we can mark that down.
Mark it down on the calendar.
Yeah, put it there for posterity's sake.
This day in history.
What I will say is philosophically, what I like that the Nets did is they realized they're not that good. And that is a key point that a lot of teams, the Heat, this is why I didn't think the Heat had the draft that I like. The Nets took, I think, guys with pretty good upside, young guys who again, create larger variables, but you need to create those larger variables when you're not that good. A Mikal Bridges-led team is not winning a championship. It's probably not a playoff team right now, more than likely. I would guess that they're like 2 or 3 spots out of the playoffs. Probably like somewhere where like Dallas was this year. That would be my guess. And realizing that is an important part of being successful in the draft. And I think they were successful in that. And I agree with, like I said, I agree with Bentley's player evaluation on those guys. I like those guys a lot.
Yeah, I agree. Jalen Wilson, I love the potential there. A guy who was a winner in college, a guy who was the best player on a national championship team. I worry a little bit about his ability to kind of keep up with, from an athletic standpoint. I worry a little bit about him potentially being a little bit of a liability on either end of the floor, but the mentality's there, the leadership's there, his ability to, he knows what it's like to be in a winning program. I think that's what a young roster needs in Brooklyn. But I think a lot of people, maybe during the draft evaluation process, and I'm I'm going to throw up in my mouth here in a minute because I'm going to talk really fondly of a Duke player. But I think during the draft process, a lot of people forgot that Derek, I believe it's Derek, right? I think that's how he pronounces it. Whitehead was basically hurt the entire year, right? And as highly regarded as he was as a recruit, we're talking pedigree a lot here tonight. I think that's important to remember. And at 22, while I do worry about him in terms of, how he's going to translate to the league, because I don't think we got the full picture on him last year because of the injury. I do think that could be a feather in his cap, though, and we could see the best version of Derek Whitehead healthy, with a good camp, with a good structure around him, with good coaching, with good nutrition and taking care of his body. I think we could see him kind of take some steps at the next level. And Bentley, you mentioned it. Clowney, probably a third of the season last year, he was the best player on the floor, regardless of opponent, even at most in most of those games as well. He wasn't just the best player on Alabama, he was the best player on the floor. So I think Ryan, you put it perfectly. Ceiling guys, right? At 21, 22, you're looking for who's got a ceiling that I can maybe reach, right? And I think from a score the ball, handle the ball, distribute the ball potentially, from that perspective with Dariq Whitehead, I think you've got a high ceiling that you might be able to reach with the proper coaching and take care of your body. And with Clowney, you've got the potential for a guy who I think could be in a mold of like a, you mentioned him earlier, Triple J, right? Bentley. I think he could kind of fit similarly, maybe not quite as athletic as Jackson is, but I think a similar type of player. So if you can get that from those two, I agree. I think Brooklyn hit home runs there at 21 and 22. And if Jalen Wilson sticks in the league, I think he could be a really good contributor. So, but self-awareness, Ryan, you broke it down perfectly. Being self-aware of who you are and what you need to get yourself over whatever hump you think you are stuck behind, that's what you need to have. And they didn't break that roster down to just be the 9th, 10th best team in the East. They said, this isn't working. We've got to start over. And I think that's what they've done with this draft. All right, so we got a pretty decent question here in the chat related to Steph. I think, legacy is a big thing we talk about with guys like LeBron and Steph and obviously Jordan and all the greats over the years. Steph, we know he's getting there, right? How many good years do you think we're going to get from Steph? He's 36, I think.
Just turned 35.
35. So, he's getting close to that big 4-0, and he is a shooter. Maybe that could be some sustainable for him, but I don't think he's going to, I don't know. Is he going to be the guy that he is for 2, 3, 4 years? Ryan, what do you think? How many good years do you think we have left with one of the best to ever do it?
So when I saw this question, I pulled up some projections, that take age into account. I use Raptor. Raptor's maybe not the best, but it's the easiest for me to pull up. They have it. He has about 3 years max to play close to what he's playing at right now. That's his max. His next year, it's about a 30% variable up and down of his value, right? So he could tank 30%. He could still actually have a better year, right, on just great shooting splits or whatever, right? But then the bottom falls out right after next year, and it's like, well, he's 36, 37, 38. He could be bad. But they give him a max 3 years, and I think that's reasonable. Because I think after that, like, his defensive limitations are really going to kill him. And they have him as still a contributing player into like 40, basically up to 40 as a contributing player, and even maybe an above average player for like another year or two, which makes sense with his shooting, right? He'll still be able to play with his shooting. But good years, what we're used to, I would say max like 2 to 3. That makes a lot of sense to me timeline wise, and it could be 1.
Yeah.
Very, very reasonably. If an injury happens, it's 1.
Injury for sure, right?
Yeah.
That's always the X factor, especially at that age. Absolutely. Bentley, agree, disagree?
So I'm not as nerdy as Ryan is, so I didn't pull anything up like Raptor or Tyrannosaurus Rex or anything like that.
Love that metric.
So just in my estimation, this is almost a 2-pronged question, right? How many more good years does Steph have, right? I'm going to break that down into how many great years does Steph have left and how many productive years does Steph have left.
Okay.
I say 2 great years, right? This coming season and the season after. He can be great until he's 37. The way he plays, his conditioning. You listen to guys who have to guard him, and they're just dog tired. Like Dellavedova almost had a heart attack, right? Like literally almost had a heart attack.
Literally on the table.
Because he moves all the time. He's never stationary on the court, which is a good note to all the young ball players out there. 2 great years, and then he can transition almost into like a Ray Allen in Miami type of role, right? Now, Steph is never going to leave Golden State. That's not going to happen. So when I say that he has 2 great years and then more years, probably 5 more years potentially if he wants, he can play till he's 42 maybe. As a productive player, that's going to hinge a lot on whether Golden State can put players around him. because he's not going to be the guy anymore, right? Like he just likely is not going to be the guy, just given age and mileage, right? But Ray Allen was not the guy in Miami. So if they are able to kind of get their two timeline thing back on track and get stars in, I think that he can continue to be a productive player for another 6-7 years in this league, with 2 of those years being MVP level stuff like we've seen from him. But again, it's going to hinge on whether that front office can continue to put talent around him and put him in positions to win and play meaningful minutes and meaningful basketball games again. Or still, rather, not again.
Yeah, for sure. 2, I think sounds right. 3, if he does avoid injury, if he does avoid some of the stuff that can kind of break your body down, nicks, bumps, bruises, that sort of thing. We see him get beat up a lot while he's moving as much as he is during the game. Guys are roughing him up off the ball, and it's a smart strategy, right? If he's going to be moving that much, you try to slow him down. You don't get called for a lot of that stuff either. So if you can bump him off the ball, you're going to get away with it. You're absolutely going to do it. So if he can avoid, right, obviously the injury bug, the catastrophe type stuff, I think 2 to 3 MVP caliber or great seasons is fair. And I love the way you put that, Bentley, the Ray Allen one, right? I think that is a perfect role for him from age 37 to probably, or 37, maybe 38, if he can stretch the great years 3. From that age until maybe 42, right? I think he could be that, a guy that sits in the corner, knocks down a ton of threes, not going to ask him to do a lot of defense, not going to ask him to be a guy that's going to bring the ball up. That's why I've convinced myself more and more from the day that it happened until today, really, the last couple of days, I've Chris Paul trade, I think, is great, honestly, for Golden State. I didn't love it at first because I wasn't sure about the fit and the way he fit their scheme, but I love what he can do in terms of taking a lot of that offensive focal point and pressure off of Steph and allow him to continue to do what he does best, move without the ball, wear you down, find ways to get open, grab the ball, short shot clock, create a shot, knock down a big 3 from anywhere in the building. With Chris Paul there, I think that helps a lot. I think it takes pressure off him defensively as well, because Chris Paul, despite being a step slower than he's been throughout his career, is still a savvy defender and defends very well on the ball. Not the most athletic guy, probably never has been the most athletic guy, but he is a guy that can be a pest against your team's ball handler. And Steph doesn't have to do it. He can just play passing lanes. We talked about guys that can sneak up on you statistically, right? With a bunch of steals that aren't good defenders. Steph's one of those, right? He's a guy that can play passing lanes, get steals, that sort of thing. The more that they can allow him to do that and not ask him to do a lot on the defensive end so he can focus on being who, Steph Curry is, knocking down those shots, I think is going to elongate the productive years. Does it get him to 42? Does it get him to 42 and beyond? And then, of course, it's when does he want to start his PGA career, right? He's a fucking crazy good golfer. I think 2 to 3 is fair. And, God, I think it's just a matter of how long he wants to play, because shooting doesn't go away. It's everything else that goes away for guys like him. I think Reggie Miller could probably still step in the gym and knock down 65, 70 fucking % of his threes in a gym shoot around, I'd love to see Steph continue to play because he's just so fun to fucking watch, for sure. I hope we get to 42 with him.
Yep.
All right. Well, that brings us to our conclusion. Going to go around, get some closing thoughts, maybe draft related, maybe upcoming free agency, some things you're looking forward to. Ryan, what you got for us? Closing thoughts here, bud.
I just wanted to mention one more team that I thought had a great draft that people are underrating. I thought the Sacramento Kings had a really good draft. They took 2 guys. They traded out of the first, which I think, again, I talked about the salary cap that makes a lot of sense with where they're at. They traded down. They ended up with 2 picks in the second round. They got Colby Jones out of Xavier, who I had a first round grade on. I think a guy who does a little bit of everything and will contribute. And then they took a guy I really like, Jalen Slauson out of Furman. And if anybody remembers, well, Bentley probably does, my bracket, I had Furman as my upset team. They did upset one team, and they, partly because of Slauson's contributions. I think he has a role that he can play in the NBA, and I think contractually that makes a lot of sense. I also want to say the 76ers did great before I found out Harden might be getting traded. They got Terquavion Smith and Ricky Council IV, who I thought were really good, like two-way undrafted free agent. I thought Terquavion should have been drafted, and probably Ricky Council probably should have as well. So I like that as well. Super excited for free agency. Happy to be back here next week, and maybe the Rockets will sign every free agent, and we'll have
sign them all.
We'll have 40. We just got apparently Kyle Kuzma's on the radar now too. So we'll just have every free agent.
Okay. All right. The news about the strip clubs is getting out.
It's pretty nice. Pretty nice.
Bentley, what do you got? Closing thoughts here, bud.
Yeah, forgive me as I try to find this guy's name, and I cannot do it. That's okay. So it was a fun draft. I think there's a lot of guys that potentially could show out in the summer league that were not drafted. The kid from UConn, the big guy, Sonogo is his name. I think that he could be kind of like a defensive big in the league. He's a little undersized at 6'9", but he moves pretty well and he has good feel. Drew Timme also did not get drafted. Probably not going to be an NBA player, but if nothing else, he might be fun in the summer league and then go play overseas somewhere. Yeah, I mean those are the two guys that I kind of had honed in on a little bit. And then I'm gonna show my ill preparedness here. The kid from Miami, Miller, I believe was his name, right? I don't know where he ended up, and that's on me. But I like Jordan Miller. Yeah. He was incredible in the tournament. Yeah, okay. Don't love the fit there, but that's all right. He probably won't make the roster anyways, but there is potential for him. I thought he was a really good basketball player at Miami, and I enjoyed watching him play. He was always smart, made the right play, was very good positioning on the court, always kind of aware of what was going on and made the right decisions. So those are guys that I am looking forward to seeing play in the summer league specifically, aside from the guys that we've just spent the evening talking about. And last week as well. Free agency is going to be a lot of fun. I hope that DeAndre Ayton is a Maverick. And I hope that Jordan Poole is not on the Wizards for very long.
Oh, man. Just for me, two small things, and they're both Spurs related. First, we didn't talk much about them tonight. I think the fact that they won the lottery, they won the draft, right? And that goes without saying. I did like the Sissoko pick in the second round. I think he's a guy that can be a contributor, especially for a team that really gutted the roster last year to get, to get to the bottom for Vic. I do like him as a guy who can play a couple of different positions in the front court and can really help you out and contribute in different ways. Good defender. But as far as if you're the first overall pick and you are the most hyped prospect since LeBron James, and everybody talks about how much of a shooter you are at 7'5", maybe fucking make a jump shot when the cameras are on. I know it's not fair, but golly, fucking 0 for 5 with the cameras on, bud. Oh, yep. Make a jumper.
He looked good in practice today. I saw him. He was practicing. He had like 5 threes in a row. So.
Yeah. He's going to be a streaky guy. I think that's just who he is. And the good's going to be really fucking good, and the bad's going to be oof, for sure. I mean, when you're 7'5" trying to run around, I think that some things can get out of order a little bit when you're that fucking tall.
A lot to move.
Yeah, for sure. But on that note, for Ryan and Bentley, this has been another episode of Backyard Buckets brought to you by Backyard Sports. We are